Hello and welcome to the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Deepwoken. I'll be breaking this video into sections with timestamps, so feel free to jump around to whatever you deem most relevant to you. I want to waste as little of your time as possible, so without further ado, let's get started. I combine these four categories because reality is that they're all connected, and there's several aspects about them that the game simply doesn't explain very well. We'll start with how leveling in Deepwoken works. In order to level up, you have to invest 15 available points into your different attributes. In order to allocate these attribute points, there's three things that you'll require. The most simple is the training item. Each attribute has an item dedicated to training it, and using said item will increase the attribute by 1. You can find these training items in pretty much any of the towns in the game. You can't just increase attributes for free though. That's where the other two factors come in: general XP and attribute XP. General XP is gained from doing basically any task in any way, whether it be completing a quest, killing a monster, crafting an item, etc. Attribute XP, on the other hand, can only be gained by doing something specific to that attribute. The thing to note on attribute XP is that only some attributes will lock you out of leveling them using their items until you get the required XP, and those attributes also lose all of their XP when you level up. The attributes in question are Strength, which you need to attack, block, or parry enemies, Light, Medium, and Heavy weapons, which ditto the requirements for Strength, and finally your Attunement, which is unsurprisingly gained by dealing damage with mantras. All of the other attributes can be trained solely by using their item with enough general XP, with 2 of those needing you to do a task related to it. Those 2 are Fortitude, by holding a boulder until you've taken enough damage, and Agility, which is increased by equipping the ankle weights and spamming roll. Intelligence, Charisma, and Willpower all just require the use of their items without any other prerequisites. Basically, what all of this means is that if you attack and kill a bunch of enemies with your main weapon, and then you increase your level all the way up using, Charisma, you power up, and then you go into the next level and try to use your weapon manual to increase your weapon, all of that XP is gone, so it's not gonna count. But after leveling up, if you want to do any of the other attributes that I mentioned, you'll be able to level them up just fine without running into any more roadblocks. Now, as for what each attribute does, ironically, this part isn't very important. Each point invested into an attribute is so negligible stat-wise that the effects are barely noticeable, especially for someone who's new to the game. What really matters when it comes to your attribute investments is the talents. Talent hands are awarded after every level up. There are a lot of talents in the game, so much so that it can often feel like homework in order to learn them all. While learning a lot of the talents in the game may help you later, my general advice is to just pick the talents that look the most interesting to you. 3 talents that I would universally recommend though are Conditioned Runner, Ghost, and Carnivore. 2 of these are legendary talents. That means that you need several talents from their talent tree in order to get them. You can guarantee common talents from a specific talent tree by talking to a Mystic NPC and then picking the corresponding dialogue, but keep in mind that with rare talents, which are the red ones, those can't be manipulated by the Mystic. That means that they're always going to show up at complete random, assuming you have the stat requirement. I'm not going to go too far into depth when it comes to legendary talents and rare talents, but just know that you need 40 agility, 25 fortitude, 5 strength, and 5 willpower if you want to be able to get the 3 talents that I mentioned. Also, if the talent Safety Dance or Observation pop up, which are both rare talents, burn those cards so that way they don't come up again, as they'll lock you out of getting talents that you're required to need to get Ghost. Burning and freezing cards are something that's called an ace. You get them every so many level ups. They appear at the top when you use the talent hand, and if you burn a card, it'll never show up again. If you freeze a card, it will show up in the next talent hand. Pretty simple stuff. During your talent hands, you'll also occasionally be prompted to pick a trait. As a new player, I would always recommend Vitality and Proficiency, as these are the most universally helpful when you're starting out. Just for the sake of clarity, so you know what all of the different traits do, Song Chant increases the amount of damage your mantras do, Erudition increases your tempo gain, as well as making it so you have more ether, Vitality just flat increases your health, and Proficiency makes it so your weapons do more damage. I know a lot of this can get very confusing very quickly, so if you just want to make an extremely average build that has access to a ton of different talents so you get a lot of choices, these were my stats for an all-around build at power 20, the max level. Also keep in mind that each power level has a flat damage scaling increase versus the AI. This means that leveling up alone objectively makes it take less hits to kill enemies, so staying on top of using your XP can help you out a lot in the long run. Finally, on the topic of mantras, you unlock these every few power levels. The mantras that you unlock show up based on which ones you choose to have show up using a mystic, along with what your stats are. In terms of attunement mantras, there are up to 3 star levels of mantras, each of which unlock depending on your attunement attribute's level. 0 star is unlocked by default, 1 star at level 20, 2 star at level 30, and 3 star at level 50. You can also upgrade your mantras at trainers around the map, with how much you can upgrade the mantra being dependent on your attunement level as well, the max of that being 80. I'm not going to cover where all of the attunement trainers are for the sake of time, but they can all be found on the Deepwoken wiki. As for mantra modifications, well, that's a train wreck you just shouldn't worry about starting out. Let's just put it that way. The in-game tutorial, which you should play when prompted, teaches you a few things about how to fight and such, but it's pretty lacking when it comes to teaching all of the mechanics. And that's why I'm here. The first thing we want to do is jump into the settings. Here you can rebind several of the keys in the game to your liking, making it much easier to cast a mantra that would otherwise be on 9, for example. The left side of the settings has several options that can be extremely helpful, and I wish I'd known earlier in my playtime. The first is definitely the low graphics mode. Even if your computer can handle the game just fine, I highly recommend toggling this on. The amount of visual clutter on the screen, especially when you parry attacks, is reduced considerably. It makes it so reacting and seeing what's going on during fights is just much easier. Input buffering is enabled at the start, but what isn't is hold to M1. This can definitely be a preference thing, but personally I like and use it. Finally, ping compensation is another must-have. Sometimes you won't notice that you've been put in a server that's less than ideal for your region, and without ping compensation on these servers, you'll be absolutely helpless. Moving over to the actual HUD itself, let's explain what all of this crap actually means. The very top bar is your posture bar. Posture is effectively your block stamina. If it fills up completely, you'll be block broken and stunned for a short duration. Your posture increases when you block an attack and if one of your attacks gets parried. It will go down very slowly over time, but can be decreased by parrying enemy attacks. The next bar is your HP. Pretty self-explanatory. If it hits 0, you'll be knocked out with the potential of being executed. The very thin bar under your HP is your armor durability. If your armor runs out of durability, it will become completely useless and its effects will be nullified. The teal bar under the armor bar is your ether bar, or mana. This bar lets you use mantras. It regenerates over time, with the speed of its regeneration being based off of the next bar, which is the tempo bar. Anytime a fight is started, your tempo automatically starts at full, and it will start to drain. You can increase your tempo bar by landing M1 attacks on enemies. The higher your tempo, the higher your ether regeneration is going to be. You can also expend a large portion of tempo to use a vent with the G key. A vent will knock back all enemies near you, and it can be used at any time, including while you're stunned. It's effectively a combo escape. Now, because Deepwoken is a parry-based game, there's several ways to make yourself unpredictable and thus harder to parry. If you press R, you can do a critical attack. These attacks often have higher windup, but much more damage. You can also feint your normal attacks by making it look like you're going to hit the enemy, but then don't to try to throw them off. A normal feint is accomplished by using an M1 attack and then hitting right-click. This will do the windup, but cancel the attack. You can also choose to use a mantra during this window instead of right-clicking, which will cancel the attack and use the mantra instead. When paired with a slightly slower mantra, you can make the opponent attempt to parry, fail, and then get hit by the mantra. Finally, you can choose to feint a mantra itself by pressing both right and left click during the windup of a mantra. This will use the ether you'd normally use for the mantra, but it will not use the mantra's cooldown, allowing you to use it immediately again if you feinted it. The last thing to note on combat controls is roll canceling and ragdoll canceling. If you right-click during a roll, you'll cancel it mid-roll, allowing you to skip the end lag completely, as well as letting you roll a second time straight away. If you do choose to roll again though, your roll will be on a slightly higher cooldown. In terms of ragdoll canceling, most attacks that ragdoll, you're able to get up much earlier if you right-click while you're ragdoll. This can be a lifesaver sometimes, so it's good to get into the habit of just mashing right-click when you get ragdolled, even if the attack can't be ragdoll canceled. Now that we've discussed all of the controls, let's actually jump into the game itself. In the character creation screen, most of these options, frankly, don't matter and are only cosmetic, so I'll only be going over the ones that, well, actually do something, starting with your starting weapon. I personally recommend starting with a sword, as it's the most balanced all-around weapon. Using a heavy weapon can be used to make fighting the AI slightly easier at times, so if you already know that you want to be a heavy weapon guy, go for it. The stiletto or knife, on the other hand, stay far away from that. You do not want to use a light weapon as a beginner. When it comes to your attunement, just pick whatever looks coolest to you. You can always use the random option later to unlock the attunements that you didn't pick or unlock them in-game themselves. In terms of your starting stats, I would personally go with 5 strength and 5 willpower so that you can start attempting to get carnivore right from your first talent hand. The rest of the stats you can slot into agility and fortitude. Next, we move into your boons and flaws. This is very important, as not all boons and flaws are created equal. Generally speaking, the boons that you want to pick from are Steadfast, Pack Mule, Survivalist, and Scrapper. This is because all of these boons, aside from Scrapper, will continue to help you past max level, whereas the rest of them are pointless once you're all leveled up. On the flaws end, you'll need to balance each boon you pick with a corresponding flaw. The flaws you should pick from are Manic, Simple, Squeamish, and Hemophilia. If you're gonna be using Carnivore, Squeamish effectively offsets this, so that's usually my go-to. You can pick more than one boon and flaw, but as a beginner, I would more than recommend only picking one. The Echoes tab at the bottom of the list are effectively buffs that you can apply to your character. You gain Echoes after your character wipes, depending on how much they've accomplished on that slot. You can also activate modifiers that make the game harder, but yeah, you don't want those right now. For now, just pick either spawning at Etria or the Isle of Vigils, and let's get started. So, you've completed the tutorial and are eager to get started, eh? Okay, well, my first task for you is to die. Okay, let me explain. First of all, death in this game works off of a 3-life system, which is indicated by your health bar. When your HP is a flat orange, it means you have your full 3 lives. Once you're killed the first time, your health bar will gain some black haze around it. This signifies that your first life is gone. If you die again during this state, you're going to be sent to what's known as the Depths. The Depths is effectively hell, and while you're down there, your health bar will be an ominous purple color. If you die in the Depths, your character will be wiped and you'll have to restart from the very beginning. While we're down here, let's talk about how to get out. You can escape the Depths, and if you do, you'll be rewarded with both of your overworld lives back. That being said, the Depths is an extremely dangerous place. My first word of advice is don't attempt to fight anything aside from the small jellyfish down here. Generally speaking, everything down here can be outran or avoided if you see it first. You also have the option of simply walking around with the logout menu on your screen, just in case, and clicking it if something big you don't think you can outrun starts chasing you. On the topic of logging out, using Alt F4 to close the game is generally ill-advised. This is because your character lingers for a short duration after you close the game this way, meaning you can take damage and potentially die or get tagged as a combat logger, whereas using the menu is instant. You can cheese a little bit with Alt F4 though, because if you're above 75% HP, you can close the game while you're PvE combat tagged. The PvE combat tag is the little blue skull that appears at the top of your screen. If it's a red skull, which is a PvP combat tag, and you Alta 4, you'll just be dead when you log back in. Now, depending on where you've spawned down here, you'll want to make your way to this easternmost gate in order to enter the City of the Drowned. Once you actually get to the gate for the City of the Drowned, take a look at how many monsters are in the city. If there's a lot of them, just log out and find a new server. When you first spawn into the game, as long as you don't move, you'll be invulnerable. So take advantage of that and find a safe city so you don't get wiped. Once you do, you'll need to ring 2 bells located in the buildings that are going to be shown on screen right now. They also emit a pretty loud noise that's easy to identify, which can be easily used to narrow down exactly where they are. Once you've rung both the bells, the gate to the middle of the city will open. Enter here, pull the lever for the elevator, and you'll be taken into a cylindrical room to face a trial. The trial's enemy is based on your level, as well as how many times you've lost both your lives on the surface. The thing is that the trial is very rarely hard per se. The main thing that will get you killed here is panic. So try to keep your mind at ease, and most importantly, ignore your health bar. This may seem like weird advice, but let's be real here. There's nowhere to run. This is do or die, so just pretend your HP bar doesn't exist, because if you're stressing about it, it's not like you can make any decisions based on your health anyway. If you succeed, you'll gain a talent for free, both your lives back, and be returned to the surface. But hang on a second, why did I tell you to die right as soon as you spawned? Well, that's pretty simple. When you wipe your character for the first time, you'll unlock the Lone Warrior Origin. This origin starts you in what's called the Trial of One, and it's in here where you'll effectively learn how to fight a large variety of monsters in the game that would otherwise destroy you if you just found them organically. So, don't escape the depths. Once you're down here, jump off the cliff, wipe the character, restart, and let's move over to the trial. In this section, I'll be going over all of the enemies in the Trial of One and how best to fight them. The first obstacle in the trial is a simple parry check. Wait until these orbs are about to hit you, then hold block to parry the entire volley. During the final volley, you just spam block as fast as you can, and you'll parry all of the attacks. The next obstacle is a Megalodon. This thing is tricky, and really comes down to reaction as well as pattern recognition. The Megalodon has 4 attacks: a single arm swipe, a double arm swipe, a kick, and a ranged projectile. Although, as long as you stay close to it, you really don't have to worry about the projectile. As for the other attacks, here's my advice. When you see the Megalodon winding up its arm for a swipe, parry the first hit, and then just automatically attempt to parry the second hit, whether you see one coming or not. Sometimes it can be hard to react to whether or not he's doing a second hit, so better safe than sorry. If he does swipe again and you parry it, attack him twice. Then be ready to either dodge a kick or parry a single swipe. If he only swipes once though, do not attack and be ready to dodge a potential incoming kick. The kick can only be dodged, so if you attempt to parry it, you're just going to get hit anyways. If you do successfully dodge a kick, you'll have time to hit him 3 times. In layman terms, what it comes down to is only attack the Megalodon after he either kicks or swipes twice. You technically do have time to attack in between the other attacks, but it's risky and simply not worth it if you're new. Also, in terms of dodging attacks, it's generally good practice to dodge into attacks instead of away from attacks, as when you dodge into the attack, you get the most amount of iframes available, and if you dodge away and mistime it and then the enemy walks into you with the attack, you'll still take damage. Eventually, you'll come out on top and progress to the next enemy, the Golem. The Golem is arguably much easier than the Megalodon because it abides by the 2-hit rule. The 2-hit rule is something that I generally go by for most of the NPCs in the game, and it says that for most enemy attacks, you'll have time to attack twice before their next attack comes out. The Golem has 6 moves, all of which it's liable to use aside from one of them. It has 2 parryable single hit moves, an overhead smash and a stomp. It also has 2 unparryable dodgeable attacks, an uppercut and this charged laser attack. And finally, we have the Spinny Boy, an attack that can be parried, but you can also just literally turn around and run the other way and it won't be able to hit you. The final Golem attack, which I said he barely ever uses, is an attack that rains rubble from the ceiling. It's so rare that you should just not worry about it. As long as you're listening out for the audio cue for the uppercut, the golem is a very easy fight. You get plenty of time to react to all of its moves, and every single move aside from the laser abides by the 2-hit rule. The next enemy is also arguably easier than the Megalodon, and that's the Thresher. This guy has 4 moves, 3 of which can be parried. Those moves are a double claw swipe, a triple bite attack, and a tail whip. As for the unparryable attack, this is a burrow ability. The handy thing about the Thresher is that it abides by the 2-hit rule for every single attack it has. Technically, the tail swipe does have less end lag than the rest of its moves, which could get you into trouble with heavy weapons, but with the sword, it doesn't matter. Simply learn the parry timing for its attacks, attack twice, and you'll be golden. As for the burrow ability, it's extremely easy to dodge. Just wait until the circle is underneath you and roll away. You should be able to make short work of this one. Unfortunately, our next enemy is liable to be hands down the hardest of the bunch, and that's the Double Angels. These guys are a pain, even for me to this day. My first bit of advice is to switch your sword to two-handed mode. You can do this by pressing Y, and it will slightly slow down your swing speed, but it will increase the amount of posture damage that you're going to deal. The second tip is to attempt to cheese them. If you wait exactly 3 seconds after this dialogue box disappears, in this exact spot, you can get a few cheap shots into their back before the angels can draw their weapons. As for the fight itself, it's all about parry trading and spamming your critical attack. The angels will usually only fight you one at a time, so as long as you focus the one that's attacking you, the other one will usually just stand around. My strategy is generally to wait for them to try to attack me, parry the attack, wait ever so slightly, and then use a critical. The AI will often try to start using another attack, making them unable to roll to avoid the critical. As with most NPCs, the angels can feint their basic attacks. This means that when you're going for a parry, hold block. If they feint, wait for them to hit your block twice and then parry the third hit in the combo. If you try to parry before then, your parry's probably not going to be off cooldown and you're just going to get hit. On that same vein, if you try to dash backwards, sometimes it simply won't register and you'll take damage anyway. It's almost always better to just block the hits. Other than that though, advice for angels for me is really kinda thin. As like I said, they're the least predictable and hence the hardest to get down to a science to beat. If you do start getting M1'd by them, use your vent if you have it. If you don't have it, then let them hit you twice before you try to parry. This works the exact same way as the block we were talking about earlier. And if you panic and spam parry while you're getting hit, you're not going to time it right, and you're just going to continue being stuck in the blender. On another note, only one angel has to completely die to end this section. This means if you have Flame Charm and knock one of them down, you can light them on fire and they'll burn to death without you having to fight the other one. It also means that sometimes you can kind of jank out the AI, pick up one of them, and execute the AI on top of something. Finally, when you do knock one of them down, make sure that you keep hitting it every once in a while, considering that every single time you hit an enemy that's knocked down, the timer for them to get up is reset. So if you don't want them standing back up, keep hitting them. Eventually, you will get the hang of it. It might take a while, or you'll inevitably cheese them from the start. Either way, we move on. The next obstacle that's going to be in our way is the Enforcer. He seems intimidating, but is actually quite the pushover. The gimmick about this guy is that he can feint his attacks and parry yours, but in practice it makes little difference if you know what you're doing. His moves include a pull, a kick, 2 swiping attacks with his weapons, and a spinning attack. He'll only ever use the spinning attack at range, and if he uses it, just turn around and run the other way. Same thing goes for the pull in that he'll only use it when you're far away. And with that move, he will always follow the pull up with a kick. Once you're in close proximity to him, just wait for him to attack and hold block. If he feints, block the next attack and then parry the second attack. If you parry the attack, use your critical right away and then be ready to parry either a follow-up or if he parries your critical attack. If you posture break him, you can hit him once and then wait for another opportunity to parry. Eventually, you'll trade enough blows and come out victorious. The penultimate enemy that you'll face in the trial is the Stone Knight. This guy is more of an endurance test than anything, as he takes a lot of hits to kill. His attacks include a ranged sword beam, sword slashes, of which he can choose to do 1 or 2 of, an unparryable kick, and an unparryable pillar attack. The 2-hit rule is back for the Stone Knight, and this time with 2 moves to look out for. With the singular sword swipe and the pillar attack, you should generally only attack once, with the sword swipe being a small exception if you're confident. As for strategy, there's a few ways to go about this. One thing to remember is that the Stone Knight will never do either of its unparryable attacks twice in a row, and often uses both of them in quick succession. This means that if it kicks and then uses the pillar, the next attack is always going to be a normal sword swipe. As for the attacks themselves, one strategy to avoid having to react properly to the moves is simply to roll based on any movement that the Stone Knight does. This will let you avoid both unparryable attacks, since if you dodge straight away, you'll avoid both of them no matter what, and it will let you react to a potential second swipe if it's coming when they do the sword swipes. As for those sword swipes, if you want to get fancy, you can squeeze in an attack between the swipes, but I wouldn't recommend that if you're new. Once you've defeated the Stone Knight, the next section of the trial is another parry check. Just spam parry when the orbs are about to hit you until it ends. And finally, we reach the last trial, and this one is quite tricky. You're gonna have to fight an Alpha Megalodon while you're constantly being peppered with some of the orbs from earlier. The thing about the orbs here, though, is that they deal 0 posture damage, which means that you can block them for free. The main goal here is to deal a bit of damage and then back off so you can block the orbs and avoid any of the attacks that the Megalodon is doing based solely off of distance rather than having to actually dodge the attack. The Alpha Megalodon does have one extra attack aside from the normal attacks that the Megalodon has, where it goes invisible and then appears next to you. You can dodge it but can't parry it. Generally, it's really easy to avoid. The Megalodon itself has very little health, but the damage windows are few and far between. It's also not the end of the world if you fail here, because at this point you've gained several levels as it is, and hopefully learned how to fight against a large variety of monsters. Assuming you succeed, you'll be exited into a basement in Minitirsa, exit the basement, ignore all of the enemies, and make your way to the coastline. This is where you'll be able to acquire a boat for free, along with the Seafarer's Chime, which lets you summon the boat at will. With the trial wrapped up, we're gonna set sail for the next section. Our next step is to go to Lower Erisia, the first low-level grinding area of the game. That's what I would say if the game didn't hate new players and want them to die. Say hello to Voidwalker, the most obnoxious thing on the planet for a newbie. If you go to Lower Erisia straight away after the trial, you will get constantly attacked by low-level Voidwalker players who aren't good enough to progress past the early stages, but are good enough to make your life absolutely miserable. A Voidwalker is a player who can teleport to other players for the sole intent of killing them. Because of the way the system is laid out, the majority of Voidwalker attacks are on people like you, and if you don't know any better, it will make your experience just downright awful. Lucky for you, you're here, which means unlike many who have came before you, you won't have to deal with these guys. You see, Voidwalkers can only TP to you if you have negative reputation with a faction that has a bounty board. By default, you will always have a negative reputation with the Knives of Elis, the faction behind Voidwalkers. However, if you increase your reputation with the Knives, you can simply remove yourself from the board, and then they can't teleport to you anymore. There is a singular event in the game that gives Knives of Elis rep, and that is the ship battle between Etria and the Knives. These events spawn in the ocean, which luckily for us is in an area where Voidwalkers can't TP to you anyway. When you find one of these events, kill the NPCs that are dressed in the Cyan outfits, and once they're all gone, you'll gain Knives rep. Keep in mind that the Knives people will still attack you, so you may have to knock them down or occasionally kill a few. But as long as you help kill an Etrian, and all of the Etrians die before the Knives NPCs, you'll still gain the rep. I recommend patrolling this area of the map, and if you don't see the event, hop servers. After 3 or 4 of these events, a message will pop up saying the Knives no longer see you worth fighting, and that's the indicator that you're now good to go. The odd person here or there may still attack you for no reason, but at the very least, you won't have to deal with constant interruptions to your gameplay. Got him again! We're still not going to Lower Erisia first. The real place that we want to start is at Etris, where we can get supplies that we're going to need before heading to Lower Erisia. While making your way up to town, make sure you grab 2 sticks. If you didn't get the carnivore talent by this point, you may also be hungry or thirsty, so if that's the case, you can drink water from the well, along with picking up some mushrooms. At a campfire, you can combine any 2 types of mushrooms to make mushroom soup. Also on your way up, grab a calabash from one of these bushes. Once you get into town, head straight to this guy right here, and speak to him, which will give you a free lumber axe. With the axe, we'll make our way in between the inn and the blacksmith to cut down this tree. Once the tree is felled, grab the beeswax that'll drop from it, and head into the blacksmith shop. Here we can use the crafting bench, combine the calabash with the beeswax, and it'll make a canteen. The canteen can be filled at the well, and all but solves the water issue if you don't have carnivore. Our next step is to get a glider. For this, we need cloth, so we're going to head out this door, and we can tell the apprentice smith that we're not going to rat him out. This will give us a discount for cloth. But we still need money to actually buy the cloth. If we make our way to the inn and talk to this NPC here, we can get them to give us 25 notes for free, more than enough for the 3 cloth that we're gonna need. Buy 3 cloth and head back to the crafting bench. Combining the 2 sticks and the cloth will make us a glider, which can be activated with N and has 15 uses. Now we want to speak to the blacksmith himself and use the remaining cloth to purchase a traveler's cloak, which will decrease the incoming physical damage by 10%. Pretty handy. Now our final stop before leaving is to go to the antiquarian. Here we can sell any leftover loot that we may have gotten after doing a bunch of the knives events, as well as being able to use that money to buy any training items we might need. Depending on your stats, the game will give you 1 or 2 training items by default, but you'll need to buy the rest. Generally, you'll need ankle weights, a boulder, prayer beads, and a dumbbell. You can also grab a piece of flint up by the general store for lighting campfires. Wrapping that up, now it's time to head out to Lower Erisia. Upon making landfall at Lower Erisia, the first thing that we want to do is head past the gate and make a hard left into this cave system. We have 2 things on the docket that we want to accomplish on this island, and both of these things involve echo talents. An echo talent is a talent that you obtain by doing a quest, and you'll automatically unlock it when getting to a certain player level on any other character that you make. This is obviously super helpful for reasons that I'm sure I don't really need to explain. After traversing the caves, we find ourselves in Pathfinder's Respite, where we'll talk to this NPC in the middle. They'll tell us to go find a purple flame atop a tall peak, so that's exactly what we're going to do. Head all the way back the way we came until you reach the gate again, head up the hill, hang a right, and follow the path until you reach the tower-struck lands. Now it's time for some parkour. There are a ton of ways to climb the towers here, so just pick your favorite route until you end up eventually on this bridge. Cross the bridge and you'll know you're in the right spot if you've reached Upper Erisia. Follow the path to the left until you reach 2 trees, and it's time for some tree parkour. Climb the lower tree, use it to jump to the next one, and then jump from there to this mountaintop. Go across the mountain and drop down on the other side where we'll find a broken bridge. This is why we grabbed that glider from earlier. Climb the pillar behind the bridge and glide across. Do note that if it's raining and the rain is green, that's acid rain, and you'll have to wait, as otherwise it will break your glider right as soon as you use it and you'll just fall off the cliff. On the other side of the bridge is a watcher, and if the watcher spots you, it will summon an angel to attack you. It's not the end of the world, but just avoid it if you can. Once you enter the temple, interact with the flame, and now it's time to head back to the NPC from earlier. You can walk out the back and glide off to the right. I screwed up here, but you can actually glide right to where the NPC was. If you mess up like me, you can do some more tree parkour to get back in, or go the same way we originally used. Either way, doesn't matter. Once you speak to the NPC again, you'll gain the Aerial Assault Echo talent, which will grant you air dashes, making clearing gaps and gaining height in parkour substantially easier. Our next stop is going to be back to the tower-struck lands. This time around, we're just going to hug the left wall until we find this drop down with a cave. An NPC is next to the cave, and when we speak to the NPC, they'll task you with killing a megalodon. Once we enter the cave, in all likelihood, there will be a pteropod here. You probably haven't fought one of these yet, but they're a real pain in the ass. They have 3 attacks, one where it swipes 10 times, one where it swipes 3 times, and one where it attacks once. You can parry all of these attacks, but it's just not worth trying as the hitboxes are super jank. Just get a few hits and then run when it starts doing the multi-swipe attacks, and eventually you'll just stat check it. As for the megalodon, hug the right side of the wall until you eventually find one. Usually you'll end up finding one before the end of the cave, but in my case, I didn't, so just avoid the acid water because that'll hurt you. and once you do find one, killing one of these should be pretty easy by now, as you probably fought them a whole bunch of times in the Trial of One. After you defeat it, head back to the NPC, and you'll gain 2 very solid Echo talents. Engage, which makes it so that M1 attacks restore your ether, and Critical Attack, which makes it so your criticals restore some posture. Now, that's the main things of note here on Erisia. If you're not feeling confident in your power level, you can continue to level here and explore the island, or you can always make your way back to Tirsa, which has more enemies of a higher caliber. As for this guide, we'll be making our way to the next section of the game, the Eastern Luminant. To get to the next section of the map, we need to make our way to one of 2 water locks. Once entered, we'll be teleported to the Eastern Luminant. Exiting the water lock will put us in the Songseeker Wilds. This is another place you can use to grab some levels and fight some slightly easier enemies, but generally there isn't much of note here other than the ability to craft bombs, which I've never even done, so I won't really be covering this place in depth, but what I will be covering in depth is our next stop, the Great Hive. Our final real stop in today's video is getting access to the Great Hive and traversing the Starswept Valley. Once you first set sail up to the island, you'll notice that the sheer cliffs make actually ascending to the playable area, well, impossible. The glider is back at it yet again. Use the green jump pads on the sides of the islands to get to the top, and then glide across to the main island itself. You'll notice when gliding across that there's this big-ass door, and we're here to open that door. Hang a right until you end up in an area with a bunch of threshers and a ravine. Dispatch the threshers and then use a jump pad to make your way into the ravine. The jump pads negate all fall damage until you land after activating them, but do be careful as landing on one from a normal fall will not stop you from taking damage. Down here is a bit of a maze, but you can use the guild banner icon, which you can see through walls, to find the correct path. You'll know you went the right way when you run into more threshers. Kill them and head along the right wall until you reach this castle-looking building. Talk to the NPC at the top, and they'll task you with killing a king thresher. Now, king threshers do not mess around, so I'd advise trying to fight these with a friend or 2 if you can. They have 2 extra attacks on top of the standard thresher attacks, an extremely fast and difficult to react to acid spit, and a very buggy belly flop. You can dodge the acid attack if you're quick enough, but the belly flop bypasses iframes. This means that unlike pretty much every other unparryable attack in the game, dodging into the attack doesn't work. That means you have to physically avoid the attack itself, which the timing on it is quite strict. You can also block the belly flop if you have enough posture, but it deals a lot of posture damage. The only other thing to note on the King Thresher is that its triple bite attack has a slightly different timing than the normal Thresher's does. The third bite in the attack comes out slightly faster, which can seriously throw off your timing if you're unaware. King Threshers are 100% soloable if you're experienced enough, but as a new player it might be better to wait on this quest until you can better stat check them. When you do successfully slay one, you'll be rewarded with the final Echo talent, Thresher Scales. This talent lets you regenerate your armor at campfires, which is a super handy ability. Now that that's over with, let's open the door. We're going to climb up to the cliff face behind the NPC, using the glider when necessary to traverse these jump pads. Continue to scale up to the left and around until you reach a cave. Follow the path through the cave until you reach a door, and to the left of the door is a hole in the wall that may be closed. If it is closed, you can break it with a powerful mantra or find a server where it's already been opened. Dropping down puts us in the Widow's Hollow, and the Widow is a bit of a janky boss, so it's best to simply run past her than trying to fight, as in all likelihood, you'll just end up dying. Past Widow's Hollow is a door. Psych! It's a fake door. Climb up to the left and then go straight. You'll find a drop down with a courtyard and a Thresher in it. Head down and defeat the Thresher, and once you enter the structure, you'll want to go to your left. The area that you've just entered is what's known as a Void Zone. There are several Void Zones throughout Deepwoken, and while inside of them, if you die, you'll be sent straight to the depths regardless of if you have your second life or not. You do get double XP in the Void Zones though, so it can be pretty handy if you're good enough. Once you've defeated another Thresher, interact with the fountain at the top of the stairs, and once you've finished, well, we did it! If you go all the way back to the huge door from earlier, it will open to you now. Through the door is the Lord's Grove, occasionally home to a Deep Owl, which will absolutely murder you if he's there, and if you get all the way to the end, there will be a green fountain. Interacting with the fountain will fly you across this massive gap into the Great Hive Aratel. This town is a great spot to set your spawn with via the inn at the top, as it has teleporters at the bottom that can take you to Summer Isle, Miner's Landing, the Lord's Grove, the Ancient Rotlands, and even Upper Erisia. These teleporters, paired with the fact that if your spawn is set here when you reset your character, which for reference does not kill you, you'll be placed right here, allowing you to go, well, basically anywhere you want. At this point in your journey, you've unlocked all of the Echo talents, and you're likely hanging anywhere from power to 15 to 18. Well, all the Echo talents except one anyways. The Chain of Perfection Echo talent is gained by beating a boss solo without taking any damage, but for obvious reasons, I'm not encouraging that in the beginner's guide. Regardless, what you do now is truly up to you. Deepwoken is a game with much more than I could ever cover here. Whether it be swearing yourself to an oath to gain unnatural powers, fighting a myriad of different bosses, braving the depths and exploring Layer 2, or fighting other players in duels to the death. Whatever you choose to do, just know this. No character is ever truly immortal. And eventually, no matter how hard you try, everyone meets their end all the same.